The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Now Jesus said to his disciples, as the Father loves me, so I love you. Now, to remain in my love, and if you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments, and I remain in his love. Now I've told you all of this so that my joy may be yours, and your joy may be complete. Now this is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. Now there's no greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends, and you are my friends if you do what I command you. I don't call you slaves. A slave doesn't know what the master is doing. I call you my friends because I've told you everything that I hear from my Father. It was not you who chose me. It was I who chose you. And I appointed you to go and to bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he will give you. And so this is my command to you. Love one another. The Gospel of the Lord. Amen. Please be seated. Sixth week in a row. Week after week after week. John. And he is Johnny one note. John in the epistle, in the second reading. John in the Gospel. And what is John's one note? Over and over again. We would think ad nauseum. It's not. It's love. Love, 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 love. Last week I preached on the theological aspects of love. And I told the story of John when he was an old man. And he lived to be 100. He was only about 18, 19 years old when Jesus walked the face of the earth. And lived to be quite old. And his disciples, John's disciples, came up to him one day and he said, "Oh, John, love, 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 love. That's all you talk about. Isn't there anything else?" And John went back on his heels. And he came forward and he said, "No, that's it. There's nothing else. Get this and you got it all. Get this and the world is redeemed. Get this, and there is no more war. There are no more violence. There is no more hatred. Understand this. Get the best practices of love." And that's what I want to talk about tonight. What are love's best practices? What are the concrete things we can do to love? Because we've got all of the good news in a nutshell today. We're in the midst of Jesus' farewell address to his disciples. He wants to say the things that really count. And the first thing he wants to say is, look, you're not here by accident. I've chosen you. I've called you. I've called each one of you by name. Look, you are not here by accident tonight. You've been called. Oh, Yahweh called me before I was born from my mother's womb. He pronounced my name. I have chosen you what? I've chosen you because I love you and I want you to receive what I have. And what I have comes from the Father. And what I have is love. And what is love? Love is self-emptying of ourselves for our beloved, for the good of the other as other. And that's what Jesus came to do. There's no greater love, he says, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And now you're my friends. You're not strangers anymore. You're my friends. You're my friends. A stranger, a slave is an unequal relationship. A friendship is an equal relationship. It's a mutual relationship. And I'm calling you my friends. And so I want you now to practice what I teach you, because I want you to bear fruit. It's the only thing that Jesus demands. And if we do that, if we really become the lovers he's calling us to be, and that's an evolving thing. That doesn't happen all at once. That doesn't take a lifetime. That takes lifetimes. Lifetimes. Pierre Desjardins says, the world is is 14.5 billion years old. Homo sapiens has only been around for 200,000 years. Homo sapiens sapiens, those who can use symbols and words and begin to give concepts out, have only been around for maybe 70,000 years, and we are learning how to love. And the day that we learn how to love completely, to love as Christ loved, to give back what is already inside, planted in seed in each and every one of us, which is divine love. On that day, Chardin says, oh, we will have invented fire for the second time. And on that day, there will be no more crying out or pain. There will be no more war or hatred. There will be no more nation against other nations. And that day, we will be all one in Christ. That's the goal. Now, the question for us today is, how do we get there? How do we get there? How do we arrive at this kind of love? Well, it's work, but it's not work. Because God begins and initiates the work. God gazes upon us. He looks upon us. He looks at his creation, and with his wonderful gaze, he loves what he sees, because there is a little piece of him in everything that he sees. And all of creation reflects the gaze of God. You know, there's a difference between gazing and staring. When you stare at someone, as the Pharisees stared at the woman caught in adultery, you can hold them in your sin. I got your number and its fractions. I'm going to stare you down. You know, who's going to blink first? That's how we do our relations with foreign countries so often. We're going to stare each other down, and we're going to see who blinks. No, the gaze looks upon what has been created, and we are God's most magnificent creation. Well, all of God's creation is a magnificent creation. And the first best practice that we are going to need to do is to receive the gaze. To receive it. And that doesn't sound very hard, but we are so busy running around trying to create our own little world that we don't take time. One of the things I never get tired of saying in the confessional is, are you taking any time for yourself? Father, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I got so much to do. So we can't sit still long enough to be gazed at, loved at, receiving the gaze of God, the beauty of God. You know, my father was a gazer. He was a real contemplative. Every once in a while, I'd catch him looking at me. And I'm going, what are you looking at? He says, I'm looking at my creation. Not bad, huh? And he gazed at me with love. Now, for love to be loved, it has to be reciprocal. If it's going to be really love, it can't be just one way. It's got to come back. I call you my friends. He says, if we are his friends, then it's got to be some kind of mutuality. We've got to give back the gaze. We've got to look back and see the beauty that is looking at us, because now we are mirroring God. And we don't just gaze upon other people. We gaze upon all of creation, and we see God in all of creation. This morning I went back to my old parish at St. Isidore in Bloomingdale. They got an organic garden. And the garden started when I was there as pastor 1,000 years ago. And so every year I go back to bless the garden, because the garden produces fruit. I got to tell you, going back there today was like going into the sanctuary of a church. It's a sacred place. Because they treated every plant, every bee that was pollinating, every ray of sunshine as a manifestation of divine reality. They were gazing upon God in nature. And I hope you all take some time to gaze upon God in nature. I hope it's not been months since you've seen a sunrise or a sunset, even though it's been months since we've seen the sun. I hope you're taking time for that, to gaze upon the wonder of God, to gaze upon our little pooches, among the dogs and the cats that run around our house, to gaze at our children. And the divine, that's a practice. That's a love practice. To gaze at the beauty of our spouse. To gaze at the people who drive us nuts. Because God is as much in them as He is in us. And in the moment that you begin to see the divine in the other, you begin to realize that the other isn't the other. The other is a manifestation of who I am at my deepest level. The other is me. When we come to that realization, we've got God loving God. What God is loving in us is His divine spark. He's just overjoyed with His creation. And so we are called now to grow in that kind of love, to practice that kind of love. And it is practice. Somebody once said, how do you get that Carnegie Hall? The old Jew says, practice, practice, practice. How do you get the Carnegie Hall? It's not down the block. You want to play the violin, you got to practice. You want to be good at sports, you got to practice. You want to be good at love? And there's nothing more important than to be good at. You got to practice. You got to practice. Cynthia Burkhardt gives a really nice practice that she encourages us to try. And it's a practice that's based on St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians. And Paul in the Corinthians says, here's what love is. And we can put this into practice. Love is patient. Love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. Love bears all things. If we're going to take our love to a deeper level, if we're going to practice love, if we're going to do best practices for love, we've got to take the words of Paul to heart. And when he says love bears all things, he doesn't mean in the sense of grin and bear it. We've got to take the injustices of life and just bear them, the indignities of life and just bear them. No. When you bear something, the Webster definition of bearing something is to hold it up, is to give it strength, to hold it up or to sustain something. What is a situation you find in your life that is sometimes most difficult? How do you bear it? How do you hold it up looking for the very, very best? And whatever the situation is, even negative situations. So bear means to, like a load-bearing wall. And we talk about Jesus bearing the sin of the world, carrying the pain of the world. Now that's the power of transformation. And when we are willing to do that, then we bear something else. We bear fruit. We bear fruit. Every woman who's given birth in this congregation today knows what it means to bear a child. How did that happen? How did that miracle happen? Well, you held on to it. You sustained it. You loved it. As it grew in your womb and it came back, and you bore beautiful fruit. And that's the fruit of love. We are called to bear everything, to carry everything, to sustain everything, and then to allow it to bear fruit, because love always bears fruit. To believe all things. When we talk about belief, it doesn't mean being gullible. No. In every circumstance of life, we've got a choice. We can either choose cynicism and divisiveness, or tribalism, or me against you, or the white hats against the black hats, or the whites against the blacks for that matter, or my group against your group, or we can dare to believe all things. The divine encompasses all. The one thing Jesus was insistent upon, especially in the Gospel of John, is to believe these things. If you believe these things, every time you turn around, you hear Jesus saying, if you believe these things, believe what things? What do we got to believe? What are all the things we got to be? You need to believe. Because you don't always see it. That the divine essence, the divine spark is inside of you. And then when you do see it, it has the potential to be born. Love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things. Now, when we talk about hope, we're talking about some future outcome. But I think what Paul is trying to say is what you are called to hope in isn't necessarily the outcome, because the future outcome doesn't always turn out the way we want it to turn out. I hope I get an examination grade of an A. I hope that I win the battle. I hope that I get the new job. I hope those are wonderful things. But what Paul is saying, look at the source. Here's what you're to hope in. It is an unending well. You hope in the wellspring of God's grace and love. When the woman at the well said that she was thirsty, she said, I'm going to give you water, and you drink this water, you'll never get thirsty again. Why? I got to keep coming back to the well because I'm getting thirsty. I'm getting thirsty right now. I got a cold today. I'm going to drink water as soon as I get back there. No, there's a wellspring inside of you. And if you are willing to hope in that and trust in that, well, you'll never be thirsty again. That is unending, because that's the manifestation of the very love of God. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes in all things, endures all things. Everything that is tough and bitter and angry shatters. Everything that is cynical rots. But real endurance is always, always, always based in forgiveness, over and over and over again. You want to be a lover at a deep level? You've got to forgive. It's a commandment of Jesus, not just 7 times, but 70 times 7. We've got to forgive, because forgiveness is always for the sake of a future. There's no tomorrow without forgiveness today. And that is the enduring, abiding love that says, no matter what's going on, I will be able to let go over and over and over again until we begin again. Where? Now at a much deeper level. You see, we're on our way. I mean, the Christ virus was introduced to the world 2,000 years ago. And the virus is spreading. I honestly think that we really are. I know it doesn't look that way when you look at the external world that we are living in today. It looks like we are going to hell in a handbasket. But I honestly believe in my heart we're loving better than we've ever loved before. We're getting slow. I mean, God works in eons. If he's taken 14.5 billion years just to get where we are today, it ain't going to happen in our lifetime. But we're part of the process. We got our part. See, we've got our mission. You know, you've all been given a mission. You've all been given a commandment. It's the same commandment. It's going to be fulfilled in 1,000 different ways, whether you are teaching ESL to young immigrant children, whether you are loving your animals in a pet shelter, whatever your mission is, whatever manifestation it has, it's got the same goal: love. Because in the end, the prayer of Jesus will be fulfilled. That all are one. That all are one. As you, Father, in me, and I am in you. Now, when you get out of this church tonight, love someone. At least be good to each other in the parking lot.